October 14th, the Velvet Room, downtown. The bass from the club's speakers wasn't just heard. It was felt, a physical pulse in the chest that vibrated through the soles of expensive shoes. Strobe lights sliced through the cigarette haze, catching the glint of a whiskey tumbler, the flash of a smile. In a shadowed booth, Elena Vance, a senior marketing associate at Sterling & Gray, let out a genuine laugh, a sound usually buried under spreadsheets and client presentations. The man across from her, whose name she hadn't quite caught over the roar, Liam, leaned in. His cologne was something woodsy and expensive, cutting through the sweaty air. He wasn't her usual type, all sharp-edged confidence in a tailored charcoal suit, but his eyes held a focus that made the bustling crowd fade. He didn't shout. He spoke low, his words a secret meant only for her, his knuckles brushing hers as he reached for his drink. It was a collision of mutual, unspoken agreement. A release. The pressure of her upcoming merger project, the endless grind, it all dissolved into the electric space between them. When his hand found the small of her back to guide her through the crowd, the touch was a brand. No promises, no futures, just the thrilling, anonymous now. The cool night air outside was a shock, but his jacket around her shoulders was a warmer one. The taxi ride was a blur of streetlights and tangled fingers. His apartment, all minimalist lines and a breathtaking view of the city's skyline, held only the sound of their breathing, the rustle of fabric, the profound silence of two strangers deciding to be, for one night, anything but. October 17th, 8:15 a.m. Sterling & Gray headquarters lobby. The polished marble floors of Sterling & Gray reflected the sterile glow of overhead lights, a world away from the shadowy warmth of the Velvet Room. Elena's heels clicked a precise professional rhythm as she crossed the lobby, her tailored navy blazer feeling like armor. The weekend was a sealed compartment in her mind, a beautiful, reckless anomaly. Her focus was absolute. The Kensington merger files on her tablet, the 9 a.m. strategy meeting, the mountain of emails already piling up. The office hummed with its usual Monday morning tension, a symphony of ringing phones, murmured greetings, and the espresso machine's frantic hiss. As she approached the bank of elevators, a shift in the atmosphere prickled the back of her neck. A cluster of junior associates stood a little straighter, their whispers more animated. Then she saw him. He stood near the security desk, conferring with Margaret from HR. Same imposing height, same confident set of his shoulders, but the charcoal suit was exchanged for a severe, impeccably cut black one. The shadow of stubble was gone, his jaw clean shaven. This was Leo or Liam from the club. This was Mr. Kaelen, Declan Kaelen. The name, announced in a company-wide blast email she'd skimmed over the weekend, finally detonated in her mind. Declan Kaelen, new head of mergers and acquisitions, effective immediately, her direct superior, her boss. The blood drained from her face, a cold wave washing down her spine. As if sensing the weight of her stare, he turned. His gaze, those same intense eyes, swept over the crowd and landed on her. For a fraction of a second, a flicker of something, recognition, surprise, a mirror of her own shock passed through them. Then it was gone, shuttered behind a mask of detached, professional assessment. He gave a slight, polite nod, the kind you'd give any unfamiliar employee, and turned back to Margaret. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Elena stepped in on unsteady legs, the image of his perfectly composed, utterly unfamiliar face burning behind her eyelids as the doors closed, sealing her in with the memory of his hands and the terrifying reality of his title. October 17th, 11:00 a.m. Conference Room B, Sterling & Gray. The air in Conference Room B was chilled, crisp with the scent of lemon, scented cleaner and fresh coffee. Elena sat rigidly in her usual seat, her notepad a field of frantic, meaningless scribbles. The entire mergers team was assembled, a tableau of nervous energy under the new regime. When he entered, the room fell into a total, breathless silence. Declan Kaelen moved to the head of the table with an economy of motion that commanded attention. He didn't smile. "Good morning. I trust your weekends were productive," he began, his voice the same low baritone she remembered, but now stripped of all intimacy, amplified by the quiet room. It was a weapon of authority. He launched into a dissection of the Kensington merger, his analysis razor-sharp, exposing flaws in their current approach she hadn't even seen. His eyes moved from person to person, assigning tasks, demanding timelines. When his gaze finally landed on her, it was like a physical touch. "Elena Vance. Your lead on the client-facing presentation deck." He stated it as a known fact. I want it on my desk by end of day Wednesday, not the fluff piece I skimmed. I want the raw data, the risk assessments, the unvarnished strategy. Understood? It was a direct, brutal challenge disguised as a first assignment. Understood, Mr. Kaelen, she managed, her own voice sounding foreign. A ghost of a memory, her breathless laugh, his murmur against her skin, flashed before her. Now across the polished mahogany, he gave a single, curt nod. See that you do. He moved on, but for the rest of the meeting, Elena was hyper-aware of him. The way he tapped his pen once sharply when a timeline was vague. The specific, clean scent of his soap cutting through the coffee smell. Once, as he reached for a carafe of water, his cuff pulled back, revealing the distinctive, silver-linked watch she'd fumbled with in the dark. Her stomach tightened. This was not a man who forgot. This was a man who compartmentalized with terrifying efficiency. The one-night stranger was gone, locked away behind the oak door of the corner office. The boss was here, and his expectations were a wall she now had to scale, with the memory of his touch as a distracting, dangerous phantom limb. October 18th, 9:37 p.m. The 22nd floor, sterling and gray, the office after hours was a different creature. The hum of life was replaced by the lonely sigh of the HVAC system and the persistent, faint buzz of the overhead fluorescence Elena had left on in her isolated corner. The Kensington deck was a beast. Spreadsheets, financial models, and compliance documents glowed across her dual monitors. Every cell in her body ached for sleep, but the memory of Declan Kaelen's impassive face in the briefing room, the unspoken challenge in his understood, kept her spine straight. She would not be found wanting. A soft click echoed down the hallway of empty cubicles, a door opening. Her breath hitched. Footsteps, measured and firm, approached, not the shuffling gait of the cleaning crew. She stared harder at her screen, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The footsteps stopped at the entrance to her cubicle. Working late, Ms. Vance. She didn't need to turn to know he was leaning against the partition, his frame dominating the small space. The use of her surname was a deliberate barrier. She finally swiveled her chair to face him. He'd removed his suit jacket and tie, his white shirt sleeves rolled precisely to his forearms. He looked more like the man from the club, and yet infinitely more distant. The deck requires it, Mr. Kaelen, she replied, proud of the steadiness in her voice. His eyes flicked to her monitors, scanning the complex data arrays. The Hallbrook figures on slide 17. You're using the pre-audit projections. The revised ones are in the secured server folder, Kensington Final. He stated it calmly, a simple correction, but it was a gut punch. She'd spent 2 hours on that slide. He'd identified the flaw in seconds. I must have missed that update, she said, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. See that you don't. He didn't move. The space between them crackled with everything unsaid, the memory of another late night, a different kind of tension. His gaze dropped for a second to her lips, then snapped back to her eyes, shuddered again. Competence is the only currency that matters on my floor, Elena. The sudden use of her first name was a jolt, a breach in the professional wall. It felt more intimate than anything in the taxi. Deliver this, then we'll see. With that, he pushed off the partition and walked away, his footsteps receding into the silent maze of the office. She was left alone with the chilling clarity of his words. This wasn't about a one-night stand. This was a test, and her entire career now depended on proving that night was a footnote, not the defining text. October 19th, 4:15 p.m. The print room alcove. The relentless pace of the week had become a blur of data, caffeine, and suppressed panic. Elena was in the secluded print room alcove, collating a hard copy of the draft deck, when the scent of his cologne arrived a second before his voice did. A security risk, printing this. Declan stood in the doorway, blocking the fluorescent light from the hall. He stepped inside, letting the door sigh shut and closing them in the small, paper-scented space. The whirring of the industrial printer filled the silence. A backup, Elena said, not looking up, her fingers ordering the pages with a precision she didn't feel. Digital feels mutable. Some things are, he said, his voice low. He didn't approach the printer, but his presence made the room feel airless. The deck is solid. The Hallbrook correction was key. A sliver of pride broke through her tension. She finally met his eyes. Thank you. It's not a compliment, it's a fact. He paused, his gaze tracing the line of exhaustion under her eyes. You're running on fumes. The final push before Wednesday's presentation requires clarity, not desperation. I can handle it, she said, a defensive edge sharpening her words. I don't doubt your tenacity. He took one step closer. The space between them was now charged, professional and personal histories colliding. But this merger is a minefield you haven't been briefed on. Internal politics, landmines the previous head buried. He looked at her, a decision hardening in his eyes. Be in my office tomorrow. Saturday, 10 a.m., not as a subordinate delivering a deck, as an asset I'm briefing. The one-night stand doesn't exist. The incompetent employee doesn't exist. There is only the work. Do you understand the distinction? It was an offer and a command, a dangerous, unorthodox alliance. To refuse was professional suicide. To accept was to walk willingly back into his orbit, to trust the man who had seen her most unguarded self to now guide her professional one. The printer finished its cycle with a final, decisive thunk. Saturday, 10 a.m., she echoed, the agreement feeling like stepping off a cliff. A single, almost imperceptible nod. Good. He turned to leave, his hand on the door handle. Without looking back, he added, and Elena, get some sleep tonight. The work deserves your best. Then he was gone, leaving her surrounded by the warm, just-printed pages and the chilling, thrilling realization that the boundaries had just been irrevocably redrawn. October 20th, 10:03 a.m. The corner office. Saturday's silence in the sterling and gray tower was profound, a vault of glass and steel. Elena stood outside the familiar oak door, now bearing a simple, brushed steel nameplate. Declan, head of M&A, her knuckle rapped against the wood, the sound unnaturally loud. Enter. His office was a testament to controlled power. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a panoramic, cloud-dusted view of the city. Everything was ordered. Books aligned by height, a single modern sculpture on a pedestal, the vast desk clear but for a laptop and a closed file. Declan stood by the window, silhouetted against the gray light. He wasn't in a suit. Dark jeans and a charcoal pullover transformed him back towards the man from the club, yet the authority remained, woven into his posture. You're late, he said, not turning. The security desk took time to verify my weekend clearance. He finally faced her. Always factor in institutional friction. He gestured to the sitting area, a low sofa and 2 armchairs, not the chairs facing his desk. Sit. This was not a superior summoning a subordinate to his desk. This was a different script. She sat, placing her laptop bag carefully beside her. He took the armchair opposite, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. The distance between them was less than in any meeting, charged with a new, focused energy. The Kensington deal, he began, isn't being stalled by their lawyers. It's being sabotaged by our own CFO. He has a side investment in a rival firm. Your original fluff piece, Deck played into his hands. The data-driven version you've built threatens him. He will attack you in the boardroom on Wednesday. The information landed like a physical blow. The corporate naivete she hadn't even known she possessed evaporated. Why tell me this? Because you need to know what you're walking into, and because I need you prepared, not blindsided. He opened the file on the coffee table. It was a dossier on the CFO, his alliances, his tactics. Spend today building your armor. Every potential attack, every manipulative question we rehearse. You will know his playbook better than he does. The word hung in the space between them. He was no longer just her boss or her one-night mistake. He was her co-conspirator. For the next 5 hours, the outside world ceased to exist. It was a brutal, exhilarating masterclass in corporate warfare. He was relentless, playing the antagonist, his questions designed to fluster and dismantle. He challenged her logic, mocked her weaker points, forced her to defend every number, every assumption. And slowly, under his exacting, ruthless guidance, her defensiveness hardened into a sharp, unshakable confidence. As the afternoon light began to fade, he sat back, a faint, approving glint in his eyes. Enough, you're ready. Exhaustion and a strange, heady triumph washed over her. Why are you doing this? Going this far? He held her gaze, the professional mask fully gone. For a moment, she saw the man from the velvet room, the intensity now channeled, purposeful. Because I've seen your competence in 2 different worlds now, Elena, and I don't believe in wasting valuable assets. He stood, signaling the end. Now, get out of here. Don't think about this until Monday. That's an order. She left, the weight of the dossier in her bag feeling less like a burden and more like a weapon. And the line between professional and personal, between boss and ally, had not just blurred, it had been obliterated. October 24th, 2:00 p.m. The Olympus boardroom. The air in the Olympus boardroom was refrigerated, smelling of polished wood, expensive coffee, and quiet ambition. Elena stood at the head of the sleek table, a laser pointer cool in her damp palm. 20 faces, the sterling and gray executive board, the Kensington principals, and the saboteur, CFO Robert Hale, with his cold, avuncular smile, stared back. Declan sat midway down the table, a statue of detached observation. He had given no sign of recognition when she entered. Her presentation began. The data flowed, clean and compelling, the narrative she and Declan had forged, now hers alone. For 20 minutes, she held the room, her voice steady. Then, as Declan predicted, Hale cleared his throat. A compelling story, Ms. Vance, but it seems built on optimistic projections. The Hallbrook figures, for instance. Are you certain they're the latest audits, not the prettier, pre-revision ones? His tone was dripping with false concern. A direct hit, aiming for the exact flaw Declan had corrected in the print room. Elena didn't flinch. She clicked her remote. A new, brutally complex slide filled the screen. You're referring to the Q3 interim audits, Mr. Hale. I'm glad you asked. This slide compares those with the final, secured Q4 figures released last Tuesday, accounting for the amortization schedule you yourself championed in the Brighton deal. As you can see, it strengthens our position by 4 basis points. She turned her full gaze to him. Perhaps your team hasn't had time to circulate the latest data. A beat of dead silence. Hale's smile froze. From the corner of her eye, she saw Declan take a slow, deliberate sip of water, the slightest tension easing from his shoulders. The rest of the session was a formality. Hale, defanged, retreated. The Kensington team leaned in, their questions now substantive, engaged. When she concluded, the lead Kensington partner nodded, a gesture of deep respect. A masterful analysis. Thank you, Ms. Vance. As the room broke into murmured conversations, Elena began gathering her things. Her hands trembled now, the adrenaline ebbing. Declan stood, buttoning his suit jacket. As he passed her chair on his way to speak with the Kensington lead, he didn't stop. He didn't even look at her. But his hand, hidden from the room by the table, brushed briefly, purposefully, against the back of her shoulder. A touch of solidarity, of secret triumph. It lasted less than a second, but it burned through the fabric of her blouse, a brand of shared victory and unspoken understanding more potent than any word. He moved on, leaving her standing there, the taste of professional conquest on her tongue and the phantom heat of his touch on her skin. October 24th, 7:12 p.m. Her desk, 22nd floor. The office had emptied, the post-mortem celebrations confined to bars downtown that Elena had politely declined. The silence was a balm. At her desk, she stared at the blank screen of her monitor, the high of the victory finally settling into a deep, bone-weary satisfaction. She had done it. More than that, she had survived and thrived under a pressure that had fused her professional and personal dread into a single, surmountable challenge. A soft ping from her work phone broke the quiet, an internal message notification. Sender, Kaelen. Subject. Ray, Kensington presentation. The body of the email was a single, flawless line of corporate praise. Your performance this afternoon was exemplary. You handled the complexities with exceptional acumen. The board was impressed. It was the kind of email a boss sends to a valued employee. Perfectly appropriate. Disappointingly sterile. Her heart, which had no business sinking, did so anyway. Then, a second ping. Sender, Kaelen. Subject. No subject. This message contained no corporate language. No salutation, just 7 words, the Velvet Room, 1 hour. If you want. Her breath caught. This wasn't an email from her boss. This was a message from him. From the man in the shadows, her co-conspirator, the one who had seen her crack and helped her forge herself anew. It wasn't a command. It was an offer, a dangerous, thrilling, unequivocal offer. If you want. It laid everything bare. The professional boundary, so painstakingly maintained through the week, was now a line in the sand, and he was asking her to choose which side to stand on. To meet him, there was to willingly step back into the chaos where it all began, but with the blinding clarity of who they both were now. To ignore it was to preserve a hard-won professional respect and live with the permanent echo of what could have been. She looked at the time. 58 minutes now. The city's lights began to wink on outside her window, mirroring the sudden electric pulse in her veins. The script of the past week was over. A new one, uncharted and entirely of her choosing, was waiting to be written.